Everybody, welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble. We are in the old Stone Age lab. All right, let's get some people in the door. Let's listen to our music, and then we'll get going. Okay, welcome to the old Stone Age lab where we have some of the largest stone tools that you could imagine. We're going to go behind the scenes here. This lab was used for 20 years to process the stone tools, the animal bones, the soils, and a range of other finds from a series of caves and rock shelters throughout southwest France. And so this house is going to stay in the family. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But at the same time, one of the goals here is this is going to be our first video from here. Hopefully next summer, I'm going to come back and we're going to do a lot more because we have a collection of really awesome stuff. Now, just to be really clear, this is not archaeology. This is a modern stone tool made by an expert flint napper. Either my dad or someone else, actually. I'm not sure who made this, but it was probably my dad. He was a phenomenal flint napper. And so we have a range of these. I'm going to show off some of the collection that we have, and I'm going to introduce you to the space and some of the finds and some of the excavations that have happened here. And we're going to go behind the scenes with some good archaeology. And right here, it's 6 o'clock in France. And that means it's Scotch time, as my dad would have it. So here's to you, Dad, in your memory. Okay, we're here back at the Old Stone Age Institute in southwest France. Look at the lovely church and cornfields over to our side. This is just a beautiful, beautiful setting where different teams from so many different excavations around this region have gathered. Come on back, Yoni. So we're going to come in here. This is kind of the cellar area, which was used for storage. I've not been here for 3 years, actually. That was when the last project finished up here. So if you come on in, you can see that all the finds that were being processed for these projects are in shelves all around. Of course, for after work, there's a lovely fridge that was full of beer. We have a barbecue that we're going to be grilling on tomorrow. And then over here, this is what we're in here for. What this is thousands upon thousands of lithics. These are authentic pieces made of flint. You can see that this would have been a cobble. People have knapped it. None of these are ancient knapped. This is all the work of students learning how to flint knap. Over 20 years of students here in the yard out there flint knapping and learning how to become experts. There's actually some absolutely beautiful pieces here that have been worked. Some of these students got quite good. Now many of them teach lithics to their students at various universities all around the world, from Australia to Europe to the US. My dad's students are everywhere, really. And so, yeah, so we're going to do a little bit of flint knapping. We're going to grab some pieces for the live stream. And there's a whole collection here. There's drawers upon drawers of these things. Larger cobbles and cores, for example, that people have worked through. One day, maybe this will be a dissertation for a master's student or an undergrad to kind of look through this stuff at the kind of debitage. Here, you can see up here, we move these little rackets, the little tiny flakes and lithics that got created as sort of debitage around. And we'll walk through what these all can tell us, because they tell us a lot about stone tools and human manufacture. And then, of course, Yoni's going to hate me, but we have the hard hat for when things get rough inside a cave. So we got to be ready. So, okay, we'll see you around back. I'm going to do a little bit of flint napping now. So look, this place was dedicated to stone tools in many ways. This is the old Stone Age lab. This is the old Stone Age dig house that was used for 20 years, I think, from 2002 or 2001 until 2022, the last time I was here. It was used for being able to process materials. And it's just such a cool place. And so I think it behooves us. I think there's dozens of videos that I can make with all the material that's here. There's skeletons of animals buried in the back. There's so much that we can do in the future. But for now, I just want to give us a little sort of touch on a bit of everything that's around, so you can get a little piece of what we're going to put together, hopefully, in the coming years with this amazing resource to be able to educate the public with really cool behind-the-scenes archaeology. And I think the first thing we need to do is you got to get introduced to my dad. My dad is really, he was the founder, the co-founder of the Old Stone Age Institute. It's currently run by Shannon McFerrin at the Max Planck Institute for Human Evolution, one of my dad's former colleagues. And but let's see what my dad has to say about some flint napping.
So the goal of our research is to try to understand how people made stone tools in the past. I mean, it's a very simple technology. It goes back probably more than 2.5 million years or so. It's a very simple process when somebody does it themselves, but what we want to do then to actually study it is to have a robot make flakes, or what we're going to call flakes, in the same way. So I can show how that's done. Basically, I have a piece of material here. This happens to be obsidian, and I have another kind of rock in the other hand. And what I'm going to do is simply strike a surface of the obsidian with this rock, and something will come off, what we call a flake. So I'll just position it like this and strike it, and here comes off the flake. All right. So that flake represents a stone tool. So you would use this to cut up animals, to work wood, any number of tasks that you wanted to do in the past.
So there we go. That was my dad. We'll definitely have some videos in his honor in the future. He is dearly missed by all of us here and the many people around the world, even though it's been 7 years since his passing. But he was an expert flint napper. He made, I don't know how many tens of thousands of stone tools in his life, and he analyzed, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, many in this friggin' house right here. But I did a little flint napping out back so that you could see sort of another aspect of it. Let's check this out really quickly. All right, everybody, my name is Flint, and I'm here with some flint, and we're going to talk flint napping for a second. So this is the type of material that Neanderthals, Homo erectus, modern humans all used for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years even, to be able to butcher and kill prey, to be able to cut plants, and to be able to do so much of what they depended upon. And we can tell the difference between a stone tool and just a random rock, partly due to the material. They selected this kind of material, flint or obsidian. It fractures in a really clear way. You'd strike this platform right here, and it would create this bulb of percussion and these kind of ripples out. You can see that on every single piece in here. A platform, the flat striking platform where it was struck, the bulb of percussion, and then it ripples out. And so this is basically the morphology of how we determine a human-made stone tool from a random rock. That's how we know that these were human-made. It could not happen in nature repetitively. We have millions of these from archaeological sites. Another thing we have is, let's say your sharp edge has run out. You can see I can even cut through the leather a bit, even though this one's used, is we can start re-sharpening it by doing what's called retouch. And by retouching it, we create a series of little flakes, of course, but now we have a rejuvenated edge right along there that's now been sharpened up. And so now we can cut with it again. And this kind of tool, once you have re-sharpened it, it would actually be called a scraper. And so this would be like an end scraper. Originally people thought it was for scraping. something like hides. But experiments by others show that it's quite sharp. It could be used for butchery, it could be used for all kinds of stuff. And so it's actually really that simple to make a stone tool, and to rejuvenate it and reduce it over time to create one tool into another. It's like resharpening a pencil. So there you have it, a brief little intro to stone tools. We have a lot more to dive into in the future, I think. There's so many here. I mean, the number of stone tools that we have, they are just absolutely phenomenal. Some of this material. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a bit. This is one that's just absolutely lovely. And so you can see just how absolutely paper thin this is. This would have been done by someone who really knows what they're doing. Someone like my dad or Shannon McFerrin or Dennis Sangaith or one of those archaeologists that have been here for decades, Flintnapping. I wish they labeled who made what. That would have really made my life a little easier, but they did not. But what we have around us is just a range of really cool stuff to give you a sense of how archaeology works. And so, you know, for example, for one, we're in a little country house. Let's be honest. We're in a little country house. And so we got to have a little bit of fun. What we have here, for example, is a jar full of dead spiders. People collected these spiders because there are spiders and mosquitoes and everything everywhere, because we are really in the middle of the boonies in southwest France. And, you know, the team likes to have a little bit of fun. We'll go through some of the jokes that they have. But what we do have is just this amazing collection of lithics, but also some of the equipment that the team was no longer using. When they were here in 2022, some of the stuff that wasn't working anymore, they kind of left behind. And so we can get a little snapshot of kind of life in the lab, processing these kind of archaeological materials. So this right here is the photo stand that they used. You can see that the lights go on. And this is how you could photograph thousands, 1,000 stone tools in a day. Maybe not that many. Maybe it's probably like 600, 700 would be the record. And you position it right here with a little scale bar right here, and then snap your photo, right? And then you'd turn it over, snap your photo. And then you're done with that one. You change the label up, and you'd move on, and you'd snap your photo. This was all built for efficiency. When we think about the Stone Age, so often people are thinking that there's nothing there. This was so long ago. There's nothing there. But I'm telling you, there's millions of these. There are absolutely millions of these. I myself have excavated tens of thousands, and I've washed and processed hundreds of thousands of these. I've shot in, and I'll show you what that means in a second, tens of thousands of these guys. These little pieces of flint, many of them just this big. Tiny, tiny little flakes from, and these flakes, these tiny ones as well, are going to cut through stuff. Come on, I thought I got some paper. Here we go. Right down here, you can cut right through something with just a little tiny thing. Yes, it's paper. I know. I gotcha. My Yoni's laughing in the background at me saying I should have gotten something better to cut. But we didn't have any meat to waste because we're going to barbecue it tomorrow. So I'm not going to go cut through some meat. We'll talk about meat in a second, though. So this place, this area of the world, with what my dad did and what his colleagues have done, was an area for innovation of kind of archaeology. So let's go into the history of these kind of excavations going. Really, this house has been used since 2001, but he's been working in this region since the 1970s. That was the first time that he was in this little village here. And let's check out some behind the scenes aspect. Oh, yeah. Let's check out some behind the scenes. Yoni, how's the screen share? Yeah, it looks good. So this excavation is from a site right nearby. This is Pestilaz, and this was a rock shelter that was inhabited by Neanderthals tens of thousands of years ago. And right here in the corner is me. This is me from when I was in university. This is 23 years ago, from 2002. One of the first, not the first excavation I worked on, but one of the first. And this was a really cool project. This is the project that in many ways my dad returned to 3 different times. He was here as a student. back in the 70s at Pestilaz. Then he directed an excavation here in 2001 through 2005. Excavation, which we'll go into in a second, right started. And so this is Pestilaz. There's a series of rock shelters in the area. We have some plans here of Pestilaz 2 as well. And so the last time we were here in 2022, they were working on this micro excavation. And what's wrong? We were working on this micro excavation where there's this hearth layer where Neanderthals were using fire right at the oldest layers in this rock shelter. We had this hearth layer that I remember excavating some of this in 2002. But they worked out this right here in the lab around me. The photos you see in the bottom right, they're actually right here in this room. They lifted out these blocks of hearths and they excavated them extremely carefully in the lab to be able to map out what was going on and how Neanderthals were using the space around these fires. And so we'll do a whole video on this. I got to talk to the team and what their results are, because this is really brand new, cutting edge micro excavation stuff in a lab. Very, very cool stuff. But this kind of innovation went back decades. So my dad, one of his claim to fame is Dibble's digging device, as it was called in the newspaper that you see here. And what that is a total station. And so let's take a look at what a total station is really quickly. Oh, wait, we got to zoom this guy back out. This right here is a total station. What this is this is a high-tech laser. I've been using this since I was like 12. Yeah, I shoot things with lasers all the time. Think Star Wars, but in a Paleolithic site from 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago. And so this piece of equipment has a computer in it, and it knows where it is in 3 dimensions because you set it up over a known point. So it knows where it is, and by mapping it on another known point, it knows where it's facing. This way is north, this way is south. And what you're able to do is all of these little pieces of stone tool, or these little teeth or animal bones that we might be excavating while we're excavating a site, or if it's a later period site, pottery or architecture, we can map them into 3 dimensions with this device. This device, what it does is it measures angles, horizontal angle and vertical angle, and then it measures distance by shooting a laser and reflecting it off a prism, just like this. And it times how long it takes for the laser to travel to the prism and to be reflected back. And with that, it's able to calculate distance and the horizontal and the vertical angle. And thankfully, for the brilliance of modern computers, it does the trigonometry for you. So it does all that trigonometry, and then it tells you the XYZ coordinate of, boom, right where you have the prism. So it's able to produce a map in 3 dimensions, accurate to a single centimeter, of where every single one of the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of stone tools and animal bones that we might excavate on a site, it can map them all out and produce that kind of map that tells you how the space was used 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years ago. And so this was something that my dad was an innovator of. He came up with, he was the very first archaeologist to shoot in an artifact using a total station in that kind of way. And so it's just absolutely phenomenal. They've been using them now. It's now standard to use these on sites around the world. Let me go back to sharing my screen, and I'll show you a plot. This is what it might look like, for example. This is what all of the different points from Pestilaz, the site we were just talking about, look like in that one profile. And we can see the periods, for example, when the cave, the rock shelter, was heavily occupied because there's a lot of material there, versus other periods when it's not. And the idea of the last project, which, like I said, I don't know the results of, they are looking at the distribution of finds around these kind of hearths to understand the use of space around these kind of hearths and the use of fire by Neanderthals. And so this kind of technology is absolutely essential to be able to take the sparse bit of information we have from stone tools, animal bones, teeth, sedimentary features like hearths and whatnot, and mapping them out in three-dimensional space and being able to understand them in their different layers. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're doing when we excavate these kind of sites, to really get into the nitty-gritty of sort of where things are and what they're doing. Now, the other thing we got to think about is animal bones. This is something that is, I hope you know by now, if you've been following me on YouTube, I love meat. I love bones. You know, if you can see here, I've roasted Easter lambs for hundreds of people in Athens, for example. You've probably, if you follow me on social media, you see photos of me smoking lamb shoulders like this one on the left we smoked just a couple months ago. This is something I do, and I also study these bones. So 2 times ago, 6 years ago, the second to last time I was here, or actually the third to last time I was here, I started a project with my dad, which unfortunately it was the year before he passed. So I've not been able to finish this project, but this was a series of grilling experiments where we took lambs and we grilled them in different ways. We grilled them on the coals with bright fire, just burning them, or maybe in a very controlled, delicious way, the kind of way we cook them today. We can't assume that our taste buds match what Neanderthals were trying to cook, for example. So what we were trying to do is I wanted to understand, how can we identify when a bone is burned, whether it was cooked or not? And so that's why we started setting up these experiments. And at this point, I've done it with something like the equivalent of the number of legs of lamb from like 8 or 9 different individuals. So I have a pretty good data set. And what we have here are some of these burned bones. Let me make myself bigger. So we have some of these bones from these experiments, and I've mapped out, again, in a kind of spatial software, where burning marks are on them. And I have some preliminary ideas on how to tell when burned bones are from cooking versus just random burning, or versus other kinds of ways that it might be burned. In my case, I study material from ancient Greece, so maybe it's ritual sacrifice. And I want to tell the difference between intentional burning or accidental burning from the kind of burning that you get when you have a cookout with your buddies, right? We're going to have a nice cookout tomorrow. We have a nice beef roast that we're going to be smoking all day. If you're in Southwest France, come on by. It's going to be delicious. But, you know, so that's kind of the goal with these kind of experiments. And so what we have really in many ways is a collection of these lamb legs where I've been plotting out the burning. And I hope next time we're here, I can continue this experiment and publish it with my dad in a sense and talk about these kind of things, because I think it's really important to be able to identify what is cooking versus accidental burning, especially for this far in the past. Did you know that one of my dad's former students, now a professor in Portugal, Vera Aldaish, she has actually determined that if you build a campfire, it can get so hot that it'll burn bones that are buried up to 50 centimeters below the ground. So that would not be from cooking. And we got to be able to tell the difference between that. And the kind of collection that we have here and the kind of experiments that we're doing are going to be able to answer these kind of questions and be able to inform zooarchaeologists in the future about how to identify this kind of activity. And so, you know, in so many ways, this is like, I don't know, it's kind of like, you can think about archaeology as forensics, right? You know, we're trying to put together this crime scene. Why do we have all these stone tools? We have so many of them. What were they doing? They were accumulated over tens of thousands of years of use of this one rock shelter. So can we actually start to identify individual activities? Can we start to identify how they were making these and how they were using them and what they were doing with the animal bones? Can we maybe identify how they were butchering them from the kind of cut marks right on these bone sort of tools, right? And so that's the kind of stuff where sometimes we need to use this kind of modern technology to map things out, but other times we need to use these experimental methods. And that's something we'll be talking about a lot too. That video that I first showed of my dad, that was from a robot that he built, where he built a robot to flintnap to be able to build an experiment that was robust enough to understand the fracture patterns of stone, and how, therefore, to be able to get a sense of why they were napped in one way or another. Man, I really wish I had an antler here to just go antler at some. Other thing that we do a lot of is we train students, right? So what there is here is there's a whole teaching collection that tells you of what sorts of different kinds, what sorts of different kinds of material and what it looks like. So for example, in this box, let me zoom in a little. In this box, as you might be able to read it, is burned flint. And so we can see the different kinds of coloration. This is again from experimental burning on it. It makes this kind of red color. It's not really showing up well. You'd see it more clearly in person, I imagine. Oh wait, I found a really nice red one. If I can pull it out. Do you see this kind of red color that's right there on the end? Let me see if I can focus it a little. I don't think of it for a future video. To put together this stuff to teach students how to identify what does burned flint look like, which is very important. How else are you going to be able to identify different kinds of tools if, for example, you don't have one that's labeled and that they can tell you that this is a scraper that goes all the way around, right? So a convergent scraper, I think it would be called. And so that's really important. To be able to train students, you need a teaching collection. And what we have here is a fairly decent teaching collection of stone tools and animal bones that we can hopefully be able to create a series of videos on in the future to be able to show you all how archaeologists go about identifying different artifacts or different types of animal remains in the field and in the lab to be able to answer questions about the past. And so that's one of the cool things that we have on hand is some of these kind of teaching collections of different kinds of tools and all the different kinds of material left behind that the projects did not need anymore. They took their material and left us some of this stuff. And so one of my goals is to be able to turn this into kind of a teaching studio for you all to be able to get a firsthand glimpse of what archaeology is like in this kind of setting and how we identify different stone tools, what we can say about material once we've identified it to put together patterns of behavior. Because in the end, let's be honest, this being the tibia of a deer does not interest us very much. Just saying Neanderthals ate deer, that's kind of cool. Being able to show that Neanderthals cooked it in this way and shared it with their families, right? So we can look at behavior. In the end, what we're looking at is activity and behavior to understand what people in the past were doing and try to answer why. And with all these little traces and all these kind of tools. So I thought what I could do is share a quick resource that shows some of the history of this house and some of the research that my dad has done. 1 second. Let me have a sip in honor of my dad. To you, Harold. His drink of choice was scotch. So, you know, if you have scotch on hand, it's scotch time here in France, which means it's scotch time everywhere, right? So let me see if I can pull this up really quickly. So if you go to, let me pop it in the chat really quickly, oldstoneage.com. There we go. This is, tell me if it's screen shares in a second. This is oldstoneage.com. And so this is the site where there's a series of data, and it's now maintained by Dr. Shannon McFerrin. You can see they're measuring stone tools with calipers just like this. I use these kind of calipers to measure animal bones as well. This will measure down to, say, the sub-millimeter level to be able to get biometric measurements or the measurements of stone tools. And so you can even see my dad here analyzing the La Ferrassie foot. But in here, you can see the history of many of the sites that my dad and his colleagues excavated over the last several decades, most of them organized out of this house right here. So if we sort of click through, the last excavation was this Pestilaz layer 8. I mentioned this to you. This was those hearth layers, and we can see the excavation in the lab right here, and we can see it sort of right there. And, you know, it's a shame that unfortunately my dad passed away in 2018, which means that it's been finished heroically by Debel Shevsky and Shannon McFerrin. And so I definitely have huge props for them. They're old family friends. And you can read on here about the methods that they use to remove these blocks from these hearths, for example. And then the methods that they've used in the lab to be able to micro-excavate them. Here's Aylar Abdulazada micro-excavating here in the lab and mapping out very carefully every little bit of sediment, every little bit of lithic or stone tool. You do know that the word lithic comes from Greek. Lithos means stone in ancient Greek, which is why we call stone tools lithics. This is where I combine my Greek knowledge with the Stone Age stuff. And so you can read about cutting edge micro excavation, which is available if you want to read about it. And I will be doing a video with the team in the future. But other sites that are on, well, the one before was La Ferrassie. And I think this was the first site that my co-producer, my lovely wife, Yonita Martini, worked on when she first came here. And here's some lovely photos of La Ferrassie. It's absolutely a fantastic site that for a long time people believed Neanderthals might have been buried. There's now a huge debate between some various scholars who still think these Neanderthals were buried, and then my dad and his team who thinks that these Neanderthals were not buried. And so you can read all about that. I'll be doing a video soon on burial of Homo naledi, not of Neanderthals, but I might reference this site when I talk about that. And so you can again in all of these start to see photos of these different seasons and the different teams that were working and processing, even right here in this house. And so it gives you a real clear sense of how this kind of material is excavated. Here you go. This is hilarious. This bone right here. This bone is one of my favorite bones ever, because this was the year when I was here. And they found this bone and they were convinced it was a Neandertal calcaneus. And they brought it home and they saved it for the director of the Max Planck Institute of Human Evolution, Jean-Jacques Houblin, because they didn't have anybody that studied bones here. But I was here. And I just started learning how to study animal bones. And I said, let me take a look at it, Dad. And he's like, no way. You're still a student. You're not good enough to look at this. Turns out when the expert got here, it wasn't a Neandertal calcaneus. It was from a bear. So if he would have let a zooarchaeologist like me look at it, they could have saved a little bit of embarrassment in front of the director of the Max Planck Institute of Human Evolution. So that's this guy right here. So there's so many fun little stories here. Yeah, but if you look through these things, they sort of summarize what's going on and what has happened, in addition to links to publications that sort of shows what happened. What's wrong? Everything's okay. Yeah, and then also here is the very first excavation I ever worked on. This was when I was a teenager. I was, I guess, 15. It was before they came to this house, and this was Font&eacute. Font&eacute was an extremely famous site. It had its own typology of stone tools. It had burials of these kind of pre-sapiens there. This was all excavated 60, 70 years ago. And it turned out in the end that it was a bunch of bunk. Everything had washed in from above. So sometimes we disprove the cool ideas we want to have. And so each of these sites, I hope in the future, will kind of become the subject of their very own videos. You can see them kind of laying out, man, this is old school. That's Phil Chase on the left, and that's Andre Debonat on the right. And I don't think that was my dad in the middle. But these are the kind of stone tools that we processed from those sites. And, you know, every single bucket of dirt that we removed, we'd find dozens upon dozens of stone tools within it. And it's just truly phenomenal, the richness of these kind of sites. Even a shitty site like this, where everything was washed in from above and displaced by this kind of water erosion, it was still very rich in material that was preserved for us archaeologists to kind of find. So yeah, let's see, where are we? And then of course we can go back. Oh wait, no, let me go back to Font&eacute, because this was the Tiation. This is what it looked like. The Tiation was this kind of lithic technology that was found all over Europe and in the Near East. It was really weird. Why was it so widely distributed? It was so widely distributed because it wasn't due to humans. It was due to water rolling of stone tools. So you could imagine that everywhere there's water rolling, there's the signs of water rolling, and it produces this kind of industry, the Tiation. And so answering those kind of questions, which have really boring fucking answers, we want the answer of Neanderthals did this really cool thing, right? That's what we were looking for. We want the behavior, the activity. But sometimes we're tricked by geological processes. Sometimes things that we think are caused by humans or Neanderthals or Homo naledi or Homo erectus or Australopithecus afarensis or the Romans or the Greeks, it turns out it's just some geological process that has tricked us into thinking that it's human-made, but it's not. And so that's part of the lesson. And one of the ways that we figured that out, by the way, back in the day, was due to this thing right here. So have you ever seen wood flow down a stream, down a river? If you look at logs rolling down a river or twigs, something with an axis to it, an axis, like this bone has an axis, well, you'll notice that when things are moving down with water, they either move perpendicular or parallel to the flow. They start to orient themselves. And so you remember how I talked about this total station here and how it could map out material to sub-centimeter precision. Well, we can actually start to map out the orientation. If I excavate this bone right here, we could take 2 points, one at this end, you can see the prism here, one at this end, and one at this end, and then we get the orientation of that find. And knowing the orientation of that find at Font&eacute, when we mapped out tens of thousands of orientations, what we were able to tell is that almost all of them were either parallel or perpendicular to one another. So they were clearly water rolled in. This was not Neanderthals or other early hominids who were actually distributing the material in the cave of Font&eacute. It was all washed in from above. And it's using this kind of technology to be able to answer these kind of questions about what people in the past did and how it was mucked around by geological kind of flows and other things like that. And so, yeah, this is kind of the history of this space. And I'll let you guys ask some questions in a second for about 15, 20 minutes while I finish a scotch in honor of my dad. But I just wanted to show you a few last pictures of him. That means I got to share my screen. So there we are doing the grilling experiments. But did you know that my dad, he had his brush with fame as well. He was in the documentary The Human Spark with Alan Alda. And he got to go out for dinner with Alan Alda. My mom actually flew in just so she could meet Alan Alda. She is there laughing in the background, by the way. She's here with us right now, chuckling. If you want to come on camera and say hi, Mom, she's saying no, she does not want to come on camera. But she always tells the story about the one time she met Alan Alda. She loved it. And he was apparently a very cool dude. Alan, if you're watching, I'd love to come on your podcast. I'm sure you're not watching. The other claim to fame my dad had is he made, I think it was 2,000 stone tools for The Clan of the Cave Bear, the movie The Clan of the Cave Bear that starred Daryl Hannah in the early 1980s. I forget what year that came out. What year is this article from? I can't remember. But as you can say, a chip off the old block. That's me, I imagine. And my brother Chip, of course. And this is the dad. And then you take a chip off of it. And that's us, right? And so he made 2,000 stone tools out of this kind for this movie. And And so, you know, it's really funny. Warner Brothers gave him the shit end of the stick, though. Did you know that? So Warner Brothers gave him the option. His name could go in the credits, or he could get a small sum of money for all the work he put in making the 2,000 fucking stone tools for the movie. Being a young professor who was not fully secure in his job yet, he chose the little bit of money. So you don't see his name in the credits, but this newspaper article here, right here, documents it. He did make the stone tools for the clan of the Cave Bear, and he was always very proud of it. Even my mom remembers going and finding the stone that they used to make that material. Was it in Arizona, Mom?
It came from Texas.
It came from Texas. The stone came from Texas that ended up in the clan of the Cave Bear. Very authentic for a movie taking place in France, right? They're using Texas flint to do this. And it was made in British, the movie was made in British Columbia, but the stone tools were made in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah, the stone tools were made in Philadelphia and then shipped to British Columbia. My mom says she shipped them up there. So, you know, if you're an executive at Warner Brothers, I hope the check is in the mail, okay? You know, it would go for some good reasons. And I just want to say, Dad, you are very missed. You might be able to see in the background this Topcon 51. My dad was born in 1951. He passed away in 2018. And as you can probably see from these photos, if there was anything he always had on his face, it was a big smile, right? He always had a laugh and a smile. He was an amazing educator, and he was a fantastic archaeologist. I think he directed something like 7 different projects in the course of his life, in Morocco, in Egypt, but mostly in this area in France. This is where I kind of grew up. You know, I even went to kindergarten here in France. And this is sort of a home away from home for me. And I hope that as we kind of renovate this space into something, if things work out with this channel, we're going to renovate this space into a studio to turn it into the kind of premier teaching studio for hands-on archaeology, for all of you to be able to get a glimpse behind the scenes of how we do things. We have animals buried in the backyard that we're going to excavate so you can learn about these kind of excavation methods. And we're going to kind of honor, I hope, my dad's legacy, and to try to sort of say, hey, all this stuff that is here, it's going to still go to good use. And I'm going to share it widely with the world and try to say, hey, this is how we study everything from sort of the oldest material from the Stone Age up through Roman times and medieval times. We'll go behind the scenes at chateaus and castles and give you a sense of what's going on. Because what archaeologists do is sort of trapped. You need to go to a university. You need to major in archaeology. You need to volunteer and have the time and the leisure to go on an excavation. And that's a problem. This is the legacy of humanity. We should be opening this up for everybody, for all of you, to be able to get this kind of behind the scenes look of, you know, oh, I forgot to show this. This is a piece of dirt. This is literally a piece of dirt that has been solidified with resin. And I want to explain how we do this and why we do this and make this kind of hands-on so you can get a sense of what we do and how we analyze that stuff. And so, you know, that's my kind of goal here. This is a very long-term project. I hope that you all are interested. If you are, please support the channel. Give this a like and a comment, you know, so that other people see it. And if you have the ability, chip in a tip, because what I want to do is make this stuff as freely and as widely available as possible. And what that's going to take is a lot of work. We need to get some more stone tools here. We need to get some expert flint knappers to give us a full collection. We need to buy some more animals and build out the osteological collection. And we need to be able to build up a ceramic collection and an antler collection, all this kind of stuff, so that we can start producing these kind of behind the scenes looks of what archaeologists do and how we do it, so that it's available and accessible to everybody. Because that is how all that fake fucking bullshit spreads. Nobody knows what archaeology is. And what that means is they get trapped by people like Graham Hancock or Ancient Aliens or whatever, the dude that thinks that the pyramids were built by conglomerate stones, geopolymers, all this kind of random stuff that these con artists essentially sell to the public that dominates even the fucking History Channel. I mean, the fake History Channel. Sorry, not the fucking History Channel, the faking History Channel, right? And so what we need to do is we need to bring the real stuff, not just the big monuments, but the smallest, littlest of all the stone tools, the smallest of the stone tools, what this kind of material can tell us. This needs to be accessible. So this is a long-term goal of this channel, is to try to turn this research lab into a teaching studio and to build up a collection here that we can bring to you on your smartphone, on your TV, or on your computer. And we're going to do it all in honor of my dad. The preliminary name, leave some comments below on where can I find the fucking History Channel? Leave some comments below on some names for this teaching studio. Right now, the preliminary name is going to be Flint's Fab Lab. That got laughs last night over some wine. We need something that gets people laughing. But if you have some ideas, I want everybody watching to leave a comment below on what you think a name could be. Otherwise, ask some questions. I'm going to pour myself one more scotch, and I will be here for 12 more minutes. And what? You want me to have some water? Yoni's laughing. She says I should stay sober. All right, all right. Jesus. Yeah, we're going to go for some dinner, some nice French food. So, ask away. Ask some questions. Yes, there's a question, a comment in a sense. Professor Dave has a Get to Know a Scientist series. I should submit a video. I've been meaning to. I'm going to wait till I'm back in Cardiff and I have my own research right there. I'm going to get into the lab and I will submit a video for Professor Dave's channel so that we can get some more exposure here. That's definitely the plan. People like Flint's Fab Lab. There we go. I figure get a nice neon sign here. By the way, TopCon 51. You probably can't see it, but I'm going to try. This total station right here, it's not going to show up well. Wait. There we go. We can zoom in on that. Read that. That's TopCon. Can you just speak? Oh, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. This is a TopCon, as you can see. And then the other funny thing is TopCon in French is a dirty word. So taupe means the top, and then con, it's the female genitalia. So it was always kind of a joke about the TopCon that we used, and then the 51 was a running gag as well. Another joke that we have, so I told you how we were excavating blocks. They love to have all these kind of funny jokes going on. This right here is all the names for the different blocks, those mini blocks that they were excavating. Let's see if I can zoom in and we can read a few of these. So we have Chew-Blocka, Sure-Block Holmes, Blockbuster, Michello Blocka, Block Panther, John McBlock, Blockout, Block Vader. So I don't know what they ended up naming them, but these were them sort of sketching out names. So we have these kind of little mementos from all the different seasons here that are filled with their little jokes. Block and roll, all those kind of fun things. Block. I don't know what they named their like 10 blocks or so. And then they always love to give out prizes. So this right here is in honor of the person who shot in the most artifacts in one day. In one day. And you can see how it, maybe you can't see it, I don't know. But you can see how it says TopCon on it, right? And then all of these names here This is the annual EDM champion. And this is how many finds we would find in one day. Sometimes we'd have 2 total stations going. I myself have shot in something like 300 or 400 artifacts in a day. That was not good enough for the record. I failed. I am not a record holder. My year, it was Satoru Roboto Murata with 860 shots. I came in like 5th with 400. It was a real shame. Satoru, if you're watching, you the man. We sometimes show your photographs of cows on the channel. And so every year they give these little fun prizes and they inscribe the names of the students that shot in the most. Are you on here, Yoni? You're not on here, are you? No. And so, yeah, so they always had these fun little prize gag gifts at the end of the season for various things, like the most shots in a day. What were some of the other contests? Do you remember? I don't know. Maybe there were fun things that they do. Even if you made the most mistakes, like if you put in the wrong stuff in the database, you get a prize for being the fool. The best in the lab for processing the most finds in a day, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So let's see. Questions. Got to go up to where they were coming in. Yes, you're a plant biology student from Sweden. Yes, I'm hoping to do some stuff with plants. We have a huge garden here, so I hope that we can eventually create an experimental garden. I certainly will be doing some videos regardless, not here, on the domestication of plants and animals. And I'll be doing some videos with some colleagues of mine that study plant remains. There was one that was supposed to pass through Wales last month, and she didn't. So that did not happen, but I do plan on doing some plant videos in the future. And I hope we can use some of this space to even build up a collection of plants, and we can show you, maybe buy a microscope and show you how we study plants, because I have experience teaching that and doing that as well. I'm not a plant expert, but I do have some experience doing that kind of stuff. 12 minutes until I pass out from scotch. Are you kidding me? Come on. I'm an archaeologist. I can hold my scotch. Let's see. Thanks, Mom. Let's see. Can people visit this place? Not yet. No, not at all. But maybe in the future, it'll take maybe 5 to 10 years until this becomes some place that could maybe be show-offable. It's kind of, our friend who lives in the village calls it Dibble's Dump. It's not even technically a house. It's a former tobacco barn built decades ago. And so, it's a really cool place, but it's really rustic. We're hoping in the future to build out the collections and do stuff with it now that it's in the family permanently, but we will see what happens with it. I can't promise anything. There's going to be some work to do. Let's see. Are these stone tools sharp and strong enough to saw through animal bone? That's a good question, Meat Eater. You have the right name for that. Longtime supporter of the channel, man. Thank you. So yes, these stone tools could saw through animal bone, but to be honest, your second question, did they just bash them to unlock the marrow, is most of what we have. I think on a recent video so in my last live stream, I showed some examples of people using a stone tool to crack the bone for marrow. It was at that fat factory. My very last live stream, I had an article where with the arrows, it was pointing at the fracture patterns for breaking open the bones for marrow. And that's actually how they do it. They wouldn't saw through it at this time. They'd crack it open and then heat it over the fire, crack it open, and maybe drink the marrow. At that site, they were actually processing the marrow for fat and to be able to make fat products to eat. You want me to lick it? Tonight, we're going to eat marrow, apparently. We're going to a restaurant that specializes in marrow, and we're going to save the marrow bones so that we can show you in a future video next year. For real, archaeology via barbecue would do real numbers on YouTube. I agree. We're going to do a lot of barbecuing, and we're going to put it up on YouTube, without a doubt. Did my dad ever take me to an archaeological site when I was little? Yes. My first time on an archaeological site was from the age of 3. I have been coming to archaeological sites here my entire life. I first started digging with like a little shovel when I was like 3 or 5 or something like that. But I first started actually excavating as a real excavator when I was 15 at Font&eacute, the site that I mentioned earlier. And I've been excavating almost every summer of my life since I was 15. There were some times off due to COVID, due to illness, due to whatever. How young was I when I decided I wanted to be an archaeologist? I was actually about 20 years old. It was in the backyard of this house. I was a history major at the time. I wanted nothing to do with archaeology because my dad was this famous archaeologist, and I was like, I got to stay away from his shadow. And I decided to get into ancient Greece and Rome because nobody knew who he was. But it was while here in 2002, that photo that I showed you of me young, that I realized I wanted to do archaeology. So 23 years ago, almost to the day, somewhere give or take a month or something, I decided I wanted to do archaeology. And it was right here in this spot. Maybe not this specific room, it was out back. I still remember the conversation I had along the cornfield next to the house with Shannon and my dad about becoming an archaeologist. And so I was just recounting that to family last night even, that specific conversation. AFR, another fucking rock. Exactly. Except, as I showed you in that video, we know this is a tool. Look, watch. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in a second. Let's see if we can focus on it. Doesn't focus super well, does it? But you can see this is the platform right here that it was struck by. And then there's the retouch all along the edges that makes it the sharpened tool. So not all of them are another fucking rock. Some of them are lovely, lovely tools. Let's see. Shout out to Evan. Thank you. I'm glad that you love the channel and you went to Santorini. Franklin, yes, we are over 70,000 subscribers. We are on our way to 100,000. We're going to hit 100K by the end of the year. Go share these videos. Let's hit 100K. What kind of stone tool do I think was used for Stone Age trepanning? So for those that don't know, trepanning is where you cut a hole in somebody's head to relieve pressure. I have no idea what kind of stone tool could be used. Probably something really sharp. Yeah, maybe some sort of drill type thing. I don't really know. I'd have to do some reading on it. I've not really read much on trepanation. But yeah, it could be good. Yes, we need to get this channel to 100,000. I agree. Somebody's saying EDM. So EDM is not just electronic dance music. It's an electronic distance meter. That's why this is an EDM. Let's see. Can I do videos that feature environmental science and climate? Yes, that's going to be my goal. When I finish my Atlantis book, I want to write a book on ancient climate change. So you'll see this channel move towards a lot more climate content, probably in about a year. So give me some time to do some more research on it. I've done some videos on it and some live streams. If you go dig into earlier ones, I think it was Big Archaeology Episode 2. I described a whole bunch of climate changes under the live tab on the YouTube channel. Let's see. When I cooked all those lambs, did I include some boiling? Yes, we did a little bit of boiling to clean all the meat and fat out afterwards, but that was after we photographed it. But the experiments here were not about boiling, so that was just to clean the bones. I know some colleagues that look at boiled bones, and you can identify when bones were boiled using a very specific type of microscope called a transverse electron microscope. These microscopes cost several €100,000. They're really expensive. So we don't have one here in this lab. But if you give a donation, maybe we can afford one in the future. Let's see. Any more questions? Did they boil water in ceramics? Not Neanderthals. Ceramics were not invented until much later. Ceramics were invented something like 10 to 15,000 years ago. I think in China, there was actually a photo that showed Paul Goldberg. He's the micromorphologist, the geologist. Where did that go? I don't know where it went. That block of sediment that I had, he's the one that does that. But he's worked on the site in China that has... I don't know. I probably put it in my pocket or something. He's the one that worked on the site in China that has some of the earliest ceramics ever found. So that's something that I'd be interested in talking about. But no, water was not boiled in ceramics until really until we fired ceramics so they could hold water. And that would have been something like, 8,000, 9,000 years ago at the earliest. So modern humans, anatomically modern humans, were the first to boil water in ceramics. However, they could have boiled them in hide, so leather or something like that. That's certainly plausible. And certainly that fat factory that was just published in Germany would suggest maybe the capacity to boil water by Neanderthals. So it's certainly something that could have happened, just not in ceramics. Let's see. Yes, so in my last live stream, Big Archaeology episode 3, we talked about the fat factory to boil the marrow that was just published in Germany. So yeah, that could have happened. Yeah, let's get more people on board. I am down. I already answered that question. Let's zoom down. We're running out of time. Yes, this is exactly the goal. So he's mentioning that some people, they've seen videos of them building real medieval castles and stuff like that. One of the goals here, if we can turn this into a real studio, is to invite down scholars and to do things like experimental stuff. Experimental flint napping, experimental ceramic firing, antler working, different kinds of fun things. So this is years in the future. There's a lot of work involved, but I think that this is the right space to do that. I hope we can. Maybe you can even hear the church bells out there. Let's see. Anything else? I think we are running low on questions. And there we go. Yes, we will definitely feature some of those resin saturated slides. I'm hoping we can do some micromorphology in the backyard at some point. And the church bells are ringing. That tells me that it's dinner time. And I want to thank you all for joining. This was a lot of fun. I hope if Dad is up there or down there or somewhere, he's probably in the walls somewhere. And I imagine that that he's looking on and very happy. And as somebody says, I think you just need money. I agree. We need some money. Chip in. Join Patreon. We share real archaeology widely for free. And all support goes towards the equipment we just bought to make this kind of video and the ability to do this kind of stuff. So all support's appreciated. We want to make this stuff freely and widely available so that real archaeology can be hands-on from your own home. Thank you all so much. Let's hear our outro music.
Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, flint and dibble. Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, dibble, 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 dibble.
Later all, love and archaeology to y'all.